Yeah, so there's evolution that coaches need to go through, that should be going through, and like any evolution, any change, it can be uncomfortable. But I think that's that's part of becoming better at anything, right? Going back to this, the statement of how I'm different today than I was a year ago. I'm fortunate enough to coach great athletes, and one of the most recent realizations that I had was with Carol. The process that I went through, and the process that I go through all my athletes, is first have a conversation. I'm like, before I do anything, let's talk, and ideally face to face, right? So obviously, right, Kara lives in Australia, I'm in Salt Lake, so we're gonna, conference call, and just being able to look in somebody's eyes, start to build that trust, understand just through expressions how things occur to them is very, very important, right? This is part of that human experience, that human experiment. If you're on a phone or you just texting with somebody or something, and you're like, hey, like, how did the snatches feel today? And they're like, oh, they felt all right. And that's what you hear, but you can see like hesitation in their eyes, or you can see an emotion that comes up. That is very, very valuable, right? So I always start with the human, right? And from there, talking about and trying to understand what works for her, right? So here's the thing, is that she's one of the fittest women in the world, right? 2 points out of first, 3 points, however you want to call it, out of like 982 to 984, I think that's the spread, right? So when you talk about it, that's like a second here. That's like a hesitation here, right? Her execution at the games was phenomenal. But I always, in the back of my mind, is what happens if you didn't put that bar down? What happens if you didn't stutter step? What happens if you didn't get that no rep? I don't know if she got no reps. I'm not saying she stutter step, but I'm just saying, as a coach, these are the things that go through my mind, right? So you have, I have, one of the fittest athletes in the world, and I'm trying to figure out what works for them. So when we talk about building an intelligent program and coming to the table and having the athlete be responsible for their end, and having the coach be responsible for their end of building that intelligent training, that conversation is huge. She's obviously done things very, very well and successfully well, right? So the whole, adage of like, hey, what do you do with the best in the world? Well, you don't do anything, because they're already the best. And so that's where some of the risk comes in, right? It's like, obviously, if I come to the table and I change everything, what's the risk there versus the benefit? And it's not necessarily risk and benefit, but it's why reinvent the wheel to a certain degree. So I asked, Kara and for the last year of training. And the funny thing is, so she sends it over in pictures. So she just basically has screenshots of all her training leading up to the games. And so I'm looking through the Dropbox, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is awesome, right? This information, this was the creation of a champion. And so for me to be able to come to the table and understand what intelligent training is going to be for Kara, it's very, very important that I understand what's made her succeed, right? And so this goes for everybody, but every athlete, it's like, okay, what have you done in the past? What has created success for you? What has not created success for you, right? Injuries, that's part of that that investigation, right? That look into who you're dealing with. And that really is the start of being able to create something intelligent. And so, there's I don't know, over 100 of these images. And, luckily, the first thing I did was I was like, I can't do this. Like, I need someone to help me, right? So reaching out to Matt Bruce and being like, hey, like, can Brandon take this on? Because he's like the spreadsheet king, right? And so So he starts tackling it, and long story short, like, end up, you know, with everybody's help, creating these calendar views of what the training were in like a Excel spreadsheet. And so taking time to go through there and saying, okay, how many times a week did she go above 90% on her presses, on her pulling, on her hinging? You know, how many times a week did she hinge? How many times a week was she doing anaerobic sprint work? How many times a week was she above threshold? Like, how often was she pulling off the ground? And understanding that this is what created her success. And that's where I am in the process right now, as I've gone through all that stuff and I've looked at it. And we've acclimated her to training, and now I'm going through a little bit of my testing, right? So grabbing that history from my athlete, right? Understanding what's worked, understanding what's not worked. Part of that is just looking at the games and saying, you know, where's the biggest opportunity to gain points, okay? And all that being said, I kind of end up with a lot more questions than answers. And I think as a coach, in order for us to create intelligent training, we need to have more questions than answers all the time.